You know that one historical fact you're dying to casually toss into a conversation at a party so everyone thinks you're the smartest person in the room? There's a solid chance it's complete, unfiltered, unadulterated garbage. Today, we're not doing a gentle little history correction. We're taking a sledgehammer to it. We're bulldozing 27 of the most stubborn, most persistent lies ever disguised as historical truth. And don't click away, because the biggest, toughest legends don't actually collapse until the very end. 1. Napoleon Bonaparte, the original short king, right? The tiny tyrant with the huge ego. The guy who was basically compensating for everything with military ambition. Except, history's most famous short joke is a straight-up lie. Napoleon was around 5'7", which was actually a bit taller than the average Frenchman of his time. So what's going on here? Why does everyone still picture him as a little angry gremlin in a fancy hat? The answer is simple. It was, arguably, one of the most successful smear campaigns ever pulled off, courtesy of the British. British newspapers and political cartoons relentlessly depicted him as a pint-sized rage monster, because making him look small made him feel less threatening. It was the 19th century equivalent of getting roasted online non-stop with memes. And then you add one more ingredient, a classic measurement confusion. The French inch wasn't the same as the British inch. That tiny difference helped cement the myth even deeper. So no, he wasn't some tiny terror stomping around Europe. He was the victim of a brutal meme war and a spectacularly bad unit conversion. 2. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship. That single word, unsinkable, is basically the foundation of its entire tragic legend. It's the ultimate symbol of human arrogance, a ship that supposedly declared itself unbeatable, then immediately proved the universe has jokes. Here's what most people don't realize. The company behind it, the White Star Line, didn't officially market the Titanic as unsinkable in the simple, bold way people repeat today. So where did the most famous fact about the Titanic come from? After the disaster, the media effectively manufactured the label. Journalists and magazines loved it because unsinkable ship sinks is a far better, far more ironic headline than massive ship has a catastrophic accident. They sharpened the story after the fact because it made it crueler, cleaner, and most importantly, more sellable. It's one of the greatest pieces of historical fake news ever, and somehow we all absorbed it like it was part of the original blueprint. 3. The Great Pyramids were built by endless armies of miserable slaves, whipped under the desert sun until they dropped, right? That's the story everyone knows. It's also completely wrong. So who actually built them? Skilled workers? Paid laborers? People organized into crews who, by ancient standards, were treated surprisingly well. Archaeologists have found their purpose-built villages, and the evidence does not look like a hopeless slave camp. Their graves show proper burials, which is not what you do for disposable people. Their skeletons show signs of real medical treatment, injuries that healed because someone cared for them instead of abandoning them. And what were they paid with? Food, serious food, bread, meat, and, this part always makes people pause, beer. We're talking about the Bronze Age's most legendary catering plan. Forget the image of constant brutality. This looks much more like an epic, high-status construction job. Hard work, yes, but with rations, support, and a place in history, plus in some cases a tomb with a view. 4. Close your eyes and picture a Viking, towering, dirty, wild beard, horned helmet. Got the mental image? Great. Now throw it in the trash because almost all of it is wrong. That iconic horned helmet is about as historically accurate as a caveman riding a T-Rex into battle. It wasn't standard Viking war gear. It was popularized in the 1800s by stage costume design because someone wanted something dramatic and instantly recognizable. Horns look cool on stage. That's basically the whole reason. And the filthy barbarian stereotype? Also shaky. Vikings were, in reality, famously obsessed with grooming and personal care. We've found piles of combs, tweezers, and razors, tools specifically meant for staying tidy. And English writers at the time didn't complain that Vikings were disgusting. They complained that Vikings were too clean. They bathed regularly, groomed their hair carefully, and paid attention to appearance, so much so that it apparently made them dangerously attractive to local Anglo-Saxon women. They weren't savage cave people in horn hats. They were well-groomed bad boys, who also did a bit of raiding on the side. 5. Gladiators fought to the death every time. That might be the biggest lie Hollywood ever sold about ancient Rome. Did fights sometimes end in death? Sure. But it was nowhere near the standard outcome people imagine. And the reason is painfully practical. Constant death was terrible business. Gladiators weren't disposable cannon fodder. They were valuable, trained athletes, closer to star players than anonymous extras. They were expensive to buy, expensive to train, and expensive to keep healthy enough to perform. Their owners weren't about to watch a massive investment get turned into a shish kebab on day one. Most bouts played out more like high-stakes boxing. Skill, technique, endurance, rules. Often judged. Sometimes stopped at first blood. Sometimes ended by decision. These weren't just cheap thrills built on a pile of bodies. In the stadium economy of ancient Rome, gladiators were assets, not throwaways. 6. So, Christmas on December 25th? Yeah, about that. That date wasn't delivered with a heavenly stamp of approval. The Bible doesn't actually tell you when Jesus was born. It's completely silent on the specific date. And the few details it does mention, like shepherds spending the night out in the fields with their flocks, leans more toward a warmer season than the dead of winter. So why late December? Because the early church pulled off a genius cultural takeover. The Roman world already had wildly popular winter festivals and holidays. Instead of trying to erase the most beloved celebration season in the empire, the church made a strategic move. It placed a major holy day into an already familiar time of feasting, gatherings, and tradition. It was the ultimate, if you can't beat them, rebrand them strategy, executed with real historical finesse. 7. A cow started the Great Chicago Fire. A single clumsy cow owned by Mrs. O'Leary kicked over a lantern and burned Chicago to the ground. It's a perfect little story, simple, memorable, and it gives you a neat villain, a farm animal. The only issue? It's basically a malicious lie. A journalist later admitted he made it up because it was a better story than the messy truth. The O'Learys were poor Irish immigrants, which made them an easy target. Classic scapegoat material. The reality is that no one actually knows what started the Great Chicago Fire. Chicago at the time was a tinderbox, wooden buildings everywhere, dry conditions. All it would take was one careless spark, a stray ember, a tossed match. Even a cigar butt could have been enough. But blaming a cow was easier, cleaner, more satisfying for a headline. Mrs. O'Leary was cleared, but her cow remains one of history's most unfairly slandered animals. 8. In the Roman arena, everything comes down to a gesture. A gladiator is defeated lying in the sand, and the crowd's mood, plus the ruler's decision, determines whether he lives or dies. We all know how it works. Thumbs down means death. Thumbs up means mercy. That image is so embedded in modern culture, we still use thumbs down every day to show disapproval online. The problem is, history is not that simple. The famous phrase, pollice verso, doesn't neatly map onto our modern thumbs up and thumbs down. The sources suggest a turned thumb, but they don't clearly spell out the exact motion the way movies do. And many historians argue the popular modern version may be backwards, or at least deeply oversimplified. Some interpretations suggest a thumb extended upward could symbolize a drawn sword, and a different motion could signal mercy, like putting the weapon away. Others argue it may have been a completely different gesture entirely, like a clenched fist. So when you smash dislike on a video, you might not be condemning it. You might be accidentally role-playing a Roman in the stands saying, "Spare him, let him live." 9. Ask anyone what a ninja looks like, and you'll get the same answer. A silent assassin in a sleek, all-black outfit, head to toe, melting into the shadows like a ghost. It's the standard movie uniform, black stealth pajamas, basically. But if a real ninja in feudal Japan showed up for an actual mission dressed like that, he'd probably get laughed out of the province, and then caught. Why? Because pure black is not nature's best camouflage at night. Under moonlight, a solid black silhouette can stand out even more than darker, blended tones. It makes you look like a moving cutout. Real ninjas, shinobi, were masters of disguise and infiltration. They dressed as ordinary people, farmers, monks, merchants, servants, anything that let them blend into a crowd without raising suspicion. And for night operations, they favored dark blues and earthy tones that actually dissolve into shadow. So where did the all-black look come from? Kabuki theater. Stagehands wore black to signal to the audience that they were invisible. We basically stole the stage crew's uniform and turned it into historical fact. 10. The Middle Ages. The era where everyone was supposedly covered in grime 24/7, like soap was some forbidden magical item. The smell must have been so powerful it could knock a buzzard off a cart, right? Let's not get too smug. The idea that medieval people never bathed is a myth. They didn't have modern indoor plumbing. They weren't enjoying hot showers with scented products. But they absolutely understood cleanliness. Soap existed in different forms. Public bathhouses, often called stews, were common in many towns and cities. And cleanliness was tied to religious and social expectations in different ways. Washing wasn't some alien concept. They weren't filthy savages. They simply had a different, and probably much colder, definition of bathing. 11. Everyone has heard it. In the Middle Ages, you were lucky to make it to 30. Life expectancy was supposedly 30 to 35 years, so people imagine medieval adults dropping like flies the moment they hit 29. This is a classic case of statistics misleading you. The average is low because it includes the horrifying level of infant and child mortality. A minor fever or stomach illness that modern medicine would handle easily could be fatal for a child back then. That drags the average down hard. But here's the twist. If you survived childhood and reached your early 20s, your chances of living to 60 or even 70 were much better than people assume. That average number wasn't a personal expiration date for adults. It was devastating math for babies. 12. Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, the lone genius who invented the light bulb and brought light to the world. It's one of the most popular stories in American history. It's also a giant oversimplification. Saying Edison invented the light bulb is like saying Columbus invented America. It conveniently ignores all the people who were already there doing the work. Dozens of inventors had been experimenting with electric lighting for decades. Humphrey Davy created an electric arc lamp in the early 1800s. Joseph Swan, a British inventor, had a working incandescent bulb before Edison's best-known versions, and he fought Edison in court over patents. So what was Edison's actual genius? He wasn't first. He made it practical. He refined the technology into something commercially viable, longer-lasting, affordable, and reliable. And crucially, he helped build the system around it. The infrastructure, the power distribution, the real-world setup needed to make lighting work at scale. He wasn't just the inventor. He was a systems builder and a marketing machine rolled into one. 13. Henry Ford, the man who invented the automobile and the assembly line. That's the legend. One guy, one breakthrough, world transformed. Except Ford invented neither. The first true automobile patent is credited to Carl Benz in Germany in 1886. And the assembly line concept? Versions of it existed long before Ford. Even centuries earlier, large operations had organized production in structured stages. And in early car manufacturing, other pioneers were already applying assembly principles. So what did Ford actually do? He took existing ideas and supercharged them with ruthless efficiency. His innovation wasn't inventing the car or the line. It was scaling the line so cars could be built fast, consistently, and cheaply. Cheaply enough that regular people could finally afford them. He didn't invent the product. He helped invent the mass market. 14. Cleopatra, the ultimate queen of Egypt, the face of a North African empire, wasn't actually Egyptian by blood. In fact, she was Greek. Cleopatra was descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals, whose dynasty ruled Egypt for centuries. The Ptolemies spoke Greek, followed Greek customs, and held on to power by marrying within the family, sometimes even sibling marriages. Their family tree looks less like a tree and more like a wreath. Cleopatra's political brilliance included something unusually rare in her line. She learned the Egyptian language. That was a smart move, a powerful act of legitimacy. But genetically and culturally, her roots were Greek. 15. Sparta, the most hardcore society ever. So of course you've heard the story that they threw imperfect babies off a cliff. It's the myth people use to summarize Spartan brutality in one sentence. There's just one problem. They probably didn't do it the way the story claims. This tale mostly comes from writers like Plutarch, who lived centuries after Sparta's peak. He was writing long after the fact, describing customs through distance, legend, and moral storytelling. And when archaeologists examined the supposed death chasm, they didn't find piles of baby bones. They found remains of adult men, likely criminals or prisoners. Believing the baby cliff myth is like a future historian describing our era, entirely through reality TV and viral stunts. 16. The Viking funeral. A mighty chieftain placed in his longship, shoved out to sea, then sent off in a blaze of glory by a single flaming arrow. It's one of the most iconic, most metal images ever. It looks incredible on screen. It's also a logistical nightmare. Think about what you're trying to do. Wind, waves, a moving target. You're far more likely to miss completely, set fire to the dock, or end up with a soggy, half-charred boat drifting awkwardly back to shore the next morning. Fire did play a role in Viking burial rituals, but usually through cremation on land, not a perfectly cinematic ship fire at sea. And a longship was a major investment. They weren't casually turning one into a ridiculously expensive, inefficient barbecue. 17. Walk the plank, you scurvy dog. It's the ultimate pirate threat. Slow, theatrical doom. It shows up in movies, books, and theme park rides like it was pirate law. In reality, it was mostly made up, popularized by writers like Robert Louis Stevenson because it sounded dramatic and looked great on the page. Real pirates were violent criminals, sure, but they were also practical. Why waste time building suspense when you could end the problem immediately? They were far more likely to stab you, bash you, or throw you overboard without ceremony. Faster, simpler, no weird plank performance required. 18. Blackbeard, the terrifying demon of the seas. A blood-soaked pirate who slaughtered hundreds and buried mountains of treasure. That's the legend. The reality is less serial killer and more marketing genius. Blackbeard was a master of theatrical intimidation. The famous beard? He reportedly wove burning cannon fuses into it to create a halo of smoke around his head. That is pure psychological warfare. The point wasn't constant violence. The point was to scare ships into surrendering without a fight. That's more profitable, less risky, and way less work. And the buried treasure myth? Also nonsense. Pirates typically spent what they stole as fast as they got it, often on booze, parties, and a very short, very loud lifestyle. Blackbeard's real treasure wasn't gold. It was his brand. 19. Why is the White House white? The popular story says the British burned it during the War of 1812, so Americans painted it white to hide scorch marks, like a patriotic cover-up with a paintbrush. It's a great story. It's also wrong. The truth is far more boring. It was always white. From early on, a lime-based whitewash was used to protect the sandstone from weather damage, and people were calling it the White House years before the British showed up. Repainting after the war wasn't about hiding burn marks as symbolism. It was ordinary maintenance. The historical equivalent of finding out your superhero's origin story is, he kept up with his paperwork. 20. The Sphinx is missing its nose, and for centuries people have blamed Napoleon's troops, claiming they used it for cannon practice. It's convenient, especially if you enjoy blaming the French. But the timeline doesn't match. Drawings and accounts from travelers decades before Napoleon was even born show the Sphinx already missing its nose. So who did it? One strong explanation points to a 14th century religious figure who was furious that local people were venerating what he saw as a pagan idol. According to accounts, he took a chisel and did some very unauthorized facial reconstruction. It wasn't bored soldiers playing target practice. It was one angry man who really hated that statue. 21. Newton under a tree. Apple falls. Bonk. And suddenly a full theory of universal gravitation downloads into his brain like an instant software update. It's a perfect myth because it makes genius look easy. Newton did say he was inspired by watching an apple fall, but the apple didn't hand him the answer. It handed him the question. The actual breakthrough required years of intense work, complicated mathematics, physics, the kind of thinking that melts your brain. It was not a piece of fruit performing divine head trauma. Genius isn't a random apple to the skull, it's decades of hard work. 22. Catherine the Great of Russia, powerful, intelligent, formidable. A ruler who expanded her empire and oversaw a golden age. And yet the one fact people whisper about is that her death involved a horse in a disgusting, physically impossible accident. That rumor is one of the most successful acts of character assassination in history. Slander so vile and memorable, it overshadowed her real accomplishments. It was pushed by political enemies and hostile gossip, designed to paint her as a depraved monster. The reality is completely unscandalous. She suffered a stroke at 67 and died shortly after in her private chambers. The horse story was weaponized gossip used to destroy the reputation of a powerful woman. 23. The idea that medieval women were always helpless damsels locked in towers waiting for rescue is a fairy tale myth that needs to die. Yes, medieval society was patriarchal, but pretending women had no agency is lazy, oversimplified history. Depending on class and circumstance, women could be serious power players. Noble women managed estates, oversaw castles, and handled political maneuvering while husbands were away. In towns, women were brewers, weavers, and merchants. They ran businesses and could be respected members of guild communities. And widows? Widows could inherit property, wealth, and authority. They often became some of the most independent and economically influential people around. It wasn't a feminist utopia, let's not pretend. But it was far from the one-dimensional princess in a tower story. 24. The Trojan horse. The Greeks can't crack Troy's walls, so they build a gigantic wooden horse, hide soldiers inside, leave it as a gift, and the Trojans, making one of history's worst decisions, wheel it right into the city. Then the trap springs, and everything collapses. It's a legendary story of strategy and deception. The issue is that a literal giant hollow horse probably never existed. Many modern historians think the story is metaphor, poetic storytelling that evolved over time. The horse may have been a siege engine, possibly a battering ram nicknamed a horse. Or it could symbolize an earthquake that damaged Troy's defenses, since Poseidon, god of earthquakes, was also associated with horses. It's iconic. But the reality was likely more engineering and catastrophe than brilliant equine carpentry. 25. Atlantis, the legendary lost city. A super-advanced civilization swallowed by the sea. People have wasted fortunes and lifetimes searching for it, and it's basically like searching for the lost city of Oz. Atlantis was invented by Plato. He created it as a fictional example in his writings. A thought experiment, a cautionary story about a powerful society that became greedy and was punished. It was designed to make a philosophical point, not to serve as a literal historical record. Plato is probably still laughing in his grave at how many people treated his political storytelling like a real map. 26. King Arthur, the noble ruler of Camelot, wielder of Excalibur, leader of the Knights of the Round Table, the quintessential British hero. And he is almost certainly not a real historical king in the way people imagine. There isn't a single solid piece of contemporary archaeological or historical evidence proving a King Arthur existed as described. The stories we know today are a blend of Welsh folklore, poetic invention, and romantic literature written centuries after the supposed time period. Arthur is likely a composite figure, multiple war leaders and mythic Celtic heroes mashed together into one legendary character. Was there a real Romano-British leader who fought the Anglo-Saxons? Possibly. Was he named Arthur, with a wizard friend and a magical sword? Absolutely not. He wasn't a king. He was a legend. And there's a big difference. 27. The Battle of Thermopylae, 300 Spartans versus 1,000,000 Persians. The ultimate underdog legend. The reason people still yell, "This is Sparta," at inappropriate moments. But the numbers got a heavy Hollywood makeover. First, it wasn't only 300 Spartans. There were roughly 4,000 other Greek allies fighting alongside them. Those allies just get terrible billing and almost no spotlight in the poster version of history. And the 1,000,000 Persians? Historians consider that a massive exaggeration. Modern estimates tend to place the Persian force closer to 100,000 to 300,000. Don't get me wrong, those are still insane, suicidal odds for the Greeks. But it changes the story from pure fantasy math into a heroic, doomed last stand grounded in reality. It's still one of history's most courageous acts. The numbers just got inflated for maximum drama. Confession booth time. Which one of these lies have you passionately argued about, defending it to the death in front of friends or family, only to realize now you were spectacularly wrong? Consider yourself officially rescued from the swamp of fake history. Your payment is a like. Subscribing is your insurance policy for the future. You know what to do.